Okay, so we've had a little time. It's Sunday morning. Digest the college football take from yesterday. Not a lot of games going on. The Ohio State game canceled. Alabama canceled. LSU canceled. The Saturday slate, I think Georgia was canceled. Just wasn't a lot there to watch. Thank God the Masters was on. That helped with fill the slate of Saturday. Even though Dustin Johnson is starting to pull away, four-shot lead. I think that's going to be tough for anybody to overcome on him. But what I was thinking about was Michigan football. I don't really know where to even start with that. Jim Harbaugh, year 6. Being the quarterback guru, has never seemed to get his guy. And that became apparent again last night, right at the beginning of the game, as they throw 2 interceptions to a Wisconsin team that hasn't played in a couple weeks. This was only the second game of the year. And to come out and dominate a Michigan team after taking multiple weeks off is just crazy to think about. And Michigan just can't get anything together. And a lot of sentiment is it's time to fire Jim Harbaugh. And I don't disagree with that at all. Talked about that this morning with Seth when we recorded the podcast. And that was our conversation. And the thing being, usually, I don't think there's anything Michigan can do about that right now. Usually when you fire a head coach in the middle of the season, one of the assistants take over. And the way they are looking as a team, I don't know that you'd have a lot of faith in one of the assistants taking over the head coaching duties for the rest of the season, given the fact that if you don't mind as an assistant not having a chance of getting the head coaching job. I don't think there's any chance one of those two guys is going to take that. I think Don Brown, that seems to be where a lot of the anger, especially the online Twitter anger, gets pointed at him because they kind of dominate defensively against the bad teams, kind of like they did with Minnesota, which brings the point of, man, how bad is Minnesota? To the fact that they got handled like that by a Michigan team that's just not very good. And 6 years into it, I think it's time to move on from Harbaugh. I don't think you're going to get a firing mid-season. Now, they'll probably get a freezing cold take on that, and they'll fire him 3 hours after I post this. But I just think you're not going to get that mid-season. They're not going to renew his contract because he's only got 1 year left. I can't imagine them extending that, which make him a lame duck coach for the next season. So I think immediately following this season, you're going to see a turnover of the Michigan coaching staff, which kind of has to be done. We talked about earlier today of everything that has to happen in college football is all based on recruiting. You recruit. I mean, obviously, coaching and development is a huge part of that. But when you take a look at the landscape of college football, as you get Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, all these teams that are up there every year, they have the most talent. There's a reason, like their recruiting classes are always high up. And they typically send the most guys to the NFL. Now, Michigan's still at the point, and they still have that name brand that they can still get very big recruits. They still send guys to the NFL. But I think the experiment of Harbaugh and your Michigan man, which is what I don't understand why they always seem to be pushing for that. But I think you have to get that firing's going to come right at the end of the season, and your recruiting window has got to get moving. Because I think you're going to see as they keep losing, and they don't have the hardest schedule going down the stretch, but it's not the easiest. I mean, the Big Ten's not looking very strong. But, I mean, I don't know if anybody's going to watch that showdown they have with Penn State coming anytime soon, because there's another program that if they start looking at is, do we have the guy? And Michigan, you heard it in the broadcast last night, it didn't even look like there was much of an effort or fight going on in that game. And when the broadcast team, especially that particular broadcast team, who are pretty positive about each team that they see and might be the most positive bunch, when they were just disgusted with what they saw on the field. I mean, that's for a primetime game. First half, 28-0. The largest deficit since the Big House opened, I believe, since 1927. And the embarrassment to the program on the national stage that was. I just think it's time for them to move on, because the Big Ten needs Michigan. Ohio State needs Michigan. That game's obviously been lopsided for a little while. It's just the college sport itself is just it's a better product when Michigan is relevant and Michigan's really good and competitive. Same way down in the SEC. So, like, Alabama is dominant, and LSU had their flare-up last year, not looking great. Obviously, you lose the number one overall pick, Heisman winner, record-setting quarterback in Joe Burrow. You're going to take a step back, plus the, however many guys they sent to the NFL. But, like, when you look at that, comparing that to how the Big Ten looks, Alabama's dominant, but the SEC is a better conference, making college football even better when you have the Auburns really good, where that Iron Bowl at the end of the year means so much. And LSU is competitive, and they're right there, that you have that little three-headed monster there in the West. And Georgia has been good over the last years, but they're kind of taking a step back. But Florida's showing up. We'll see how that goes through the stretch. But Trask, I think last night I threw for six touchdowns. I may have miscounted. Hell, I mean, as bad as Michigan's defense was, he might have thrown one against Michigan, from Florida. I mean, they could have just gave him that. Seems like it's possible. They give up touchdowns to everybody from a long distance away. But they got a quarterback there in Florida. Kind of intrigued on how that's going to go. But college football is just not a great watch this year. I mean, there's so many defenses that are down and teams that are down, and none more glaring than the Michigan squad. I think everybody's probably in agreement that the Harbaugh experiment is over. But that just leaves a question in the landscape and everybody that's out there. And that's a question I'd have to you is, where do they go from here? What coach is going to be able to bring Michigan back to being competitive? I'm not saying winning national championships, but, for the most part in that 11, 12, competing for the Big Ten championship, possibly competing to make the college football playoff. What young coach, because I think that's probably the way they'll go, what young up-and-comer are you looking to give a program over to? And it's an interesting thing. You hear Fickell's name tossed around there more. That'd be interesting, being an Ohio State guy coming out of Cincinnati, which Cincinnati's having a hell of a year. Almost had a fight with the other team's opposing coach there earlier in the week. But that'd be an interesting thing. That'd make that matchup between Ohio State and Michigan even that much more exciting and contentious, I guess. But, where do you go from here if you're Michigan? Who's your next head coach?
Whiteside?